Have you been looking for a Taekwondo podcast with qualified people who know what they're talking about, who help you keep up with everything going on in the Taekwondo world? Well, you found it. This is the Taekwondo Podcast. Taekwondo news, competitions and other events, training and sports science, keeping the fans, coaches, and high-performance athletes up to date with the latest news and trends on Olympic Taekwondo. Let's do this. This is the Taekwondo Podcast. And now your hosts, Coach César Valentim and Peter Nessler.
Hello and welcome to the Taekwondo Podcast. We're a podcast based out of Austria in English language for everyone out there who likes Taekwondo. In this episode, we talk about the World Championships in Guadalajara with Coach Juan Moreno. Welcome to our podcast. I'm Coach César Valentim, and with me is Coach Juan Moreno. Hi Juan, nice to see you again.
Good to see you, César. How's everything?
Yeah, well, probably still recovering from Mexico. I came back, I got to myself tonsillitis, 2 weeks, forced vacations, antibiotics and all that.
Not good with the tonsillitis, but a forced vacation, yeah, not too bad. Not too
Actually,
bad.
I think it was my body telling me, do take a break.
Yeah. Actually, strange enough, I mean, when I got back from Mexico, I was fine. And then about the week before I left to the Grand Prix final, I don't get sick. I can't tell you the last time I was sick. And I was beat up for the same thing for about a week. And luckily, it was starting to get better before I left to Saudi Arabia. So it was okay.
Yeah, well, in Mexico, I was feeling fine. I was hitting the gym every day in the morning. Of course, jet lag, but everything else was fine. Usually you get a little, tired and stuff during competitions like that, especially when you're 2 weeks abroad. But I came back straight into training, full motivation. 2 days later, boom.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Guadalajara.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because obviously there's been a lot of opinions and dialogue, on social media and among our friends and colleagues. And, I think, first, I mean, let's start with the good. I mean, the good is I don't think there's very few countries in the world that can put on any like Mexico. And we've seen it in 2013 in Puebla. We've seen it in 2015, the Grand Prix finals. Heck, they invented the gala. And this was no different. I think the venue was spectacular. I think the transportation was on point all the time. The outside of the venue with all the vendors and food and I call it the mix zone like they have in the Olympics was, I mean, second to none. I mean, I've never seen one like that, in any of the world events. I think that was just amazing. The crowds, ridiculous. When you have these young little kids running around that understand Taekwondo, you have the current people that are around in the sport. And then to see Mexico has such a history of great champions and great teams and great coaches from the past, to see them all converge and come together. And my wife is from Mexico, so she's in that generation of the 90s and early 2000s. And to see those people just sitting 15, 20, 30 people together and cheering and going to dinner and reminiscing. And I think it's a really unique place. I mean, Mexico with their love affair for the sport of Taekwondo. So I don't know how you felt, but I thought the venue was great. The crowd was great. And it definitely lived up to the past things that Mexico has presented, to the world stage.
I've been to over a dozen World Championships, and this was by far the best organized. The venue, of course, when you go inside, and I get a chance to get a sneak peek before it was even open to the public, it was amazing. The idea of taking an Olympic swimming pool, 50 meters, covering it, except that little podium and entrance way, it was amazing. The setup was perfect. The organization outside of the event, the warm-up areas, they were both of them fine. Maybe the staging area before the event was too small, but everything else was okay. The village was very, very good. Security, it felt safe all the time. Transportation was well organized. Volunteers were friendly. Yeah, well, I can complain about some stuff, of course. Like they had this cashless payment system. I charged my cars with $500, and then when I got to get the refund because of the money didn't use, you need to have a Mexican bank account, and if you didn't have it, and they didn't even answer to the emails after 5 days refund deadline, I basically lost $400. But it's okay, something to cry about later. But those things are a little bit strange. The event, the way they prepare the athletes, the way the seamlessly the registration, the accreditation, the photo shooting, everything was so perfect. And of course, the event itself starts with the best opening ceremony I've ever seen in a Taekwondo event, except at the Olympics. It was really world-class level, the Circus du Soleil level. I think many people left after the Cookie One demonstration, the World Taekwondo Demo Team show, and then they didn't realize that the show was only half. It was amazing. I think you were one of them.
I was one of those idiots, and it was funny because I'm going to go back to something that you said. First of all, that you're right. I want to say about the volunteers. The volunteers were, I mean, everybody was so nice. Like you always run into somebody that's a little boss. I had a great experience with all of them. That cashless thing threw me for a loop at the beginning. And it was funny because one day I go and I said, I want to put 200. So I put 100. So I'm like, okay, I'm good. I go to order some food and they're like, oh, you don't have enough. And I'm like, what? Well, they put 200 pesos on, not $200. And so I can barely buy a soda and a bowl of ramen. So yeah, it kind of threw me for a loop, but I didn't lose $500 like you. But the opening ceremonies, I didn't even talk about that. You're absolutely right. I mean, I know the mariachis is just second to none, especially in Guadalajara. And it wasn't during the opening ceremonies. Was the Maria Espinosa thing during the opening ceremonies, or was it during?
No. It was when they because she just had a kid and they did that ceremony with her.
So I thought I'm a.
Oh, was the second day? I think it was second day.
Oh, really? So, I mean, I want to talk about that. I'm a huge Maria Espinosa fan. I mean, I just think what she's done in the sport is just amazing from being pre-electronics to early electronics to, into the Olympic Games. And she doesn't have the body, she doesn't have the stuff, but somehow she found a way to win. So I'm just a huge fan of hers. And in the last 3 years, I had a lot of matches with her, coaching an athlete that competed head to head with her. And it always kind of tore me a little bit because she's someone that I really look up to. But I had a job to do to beat her. But to see them recognize her like that, and just the love and the appreciation for her is, I think we need to do a little bit more of that with our heroes in the sport, because if you look at other sports, I mean, why do people love Pele? Why do people love Maradona? Why do people love, Zidane? Just all the different sport figures. I don't think we do a good enough job of looking at some of the history. So for me, to have Maria honored like that in Mexico was like a little tear there.
I remember, Maria is, of course, she's one of the athletes I've mentioned a lot after these Worlds. That's one of those missing athletes. We missed Milica Mandic. We've missed, of course, Bianca due to an injury, and Maria Espinosa. So we saw the heavyweight class lost. It was like three of the top names in one championship. Maria Espinosa was one of those charismatic athletes that around the world brought joy. Not only her, also the French girl, the heavyweight, I forgot her name. Gladys, yes. She was a party. She was the life of the party. And Maria, when she even got Coca-Cola sponsorships, it was amazing the level of recognition that she and the sport have in Mexico. As you mentioned, Taekwondo is in Mexico and not compared to any other country in the world. They're right up there with football, with soccer, and it's Taekwondo is number 2, or at least people used to say it's number 2. You wouldn't pull up an event in any other country like that.
it's funny you say about Maria's, like a lot like Jay Jones has done in Great Britain. I mean, they've transcended the sport of Taekwondo and kind of evolved into that real mainstream, to have Adidas sponsorships or Under Armour, or to have Coca-Cola or Visa. These aren't, no offense, but local distributors of uniforms and stuff like that. These are real worldwide sponsors, and there hasn't been many Taekwondo athletes to enter into that realm. And kind of ironically, it's 2 female athletes, so yeah, I mean, Maria is a special woman and a special athlete, and rightfully was, applauded on that stage. So it's pretty
also after the Tokyo Olympics, the same with Adriana being sponsored by Adidas in Spain and having billboards with her with her body and face, and bringing Taekwondo to the spotlight. Yeah. Again, the women are doing a good job, and we saw, actually, in my opinion, I liked female Taekwondo a lot, and it was very nice to see how they did at the Worlds in every weight division, from Lena Stojkovic in 46 all the way to the heavyweight female athletes. It was a very good show they put up out there, and the boys was, we'll get into that later. We'll get into the results. But the event was not all nice. I think it was, for a long time, I remember in Chelyabinsk we had a coach meeting because of the famous monkey kicks, and we had to change it in the middle of the game. Again, 7 years later, we set almost in a coach revolution. I think I've never seen so much work from so many coaches getting together to put up a strategy to talk with World Taekwondo about how to develop the sport.
Yeah. I was thinking earlier about our conversation, and I don't know, I feel like I'm a very straightforward person, and I like to believe I'm an honest person. And, one of the things I think that I do is try not to put I try to take personal emotion out of stuff. And so it allows me to criticize my friends, but it also allows me to compliment people that I might not like. And I think it's important to say that, so it doesn't, it doesn't seem like there's an attack on anybody, or there's nothing. This is all coming from a good place. I mean, there were some great things at that event, but there were some glaring problems at the event, and again, I'm not promoting one system or the other, but it was apparent that the system, the PSS system, was having difficulties in the first 3-4 days, especially, and it got a little bit better towards the end, but definitely not with the headgears. I mean, I think those were out of whack, through the whole event, but it literally changed the environment of the competition, from the way the athletes felt, the way the coaches felt, the way just federations that invest a lot of time and money and effort and resources into their programs, to go to an event and to start off like this and just have everybody putting their hands up and not having any answers or any explanation was just, it's something that at one of the highest levels of our sport should just not happen. It can't be like that. And it was, I try to do my due diligence and speak with people. And I have a number of video clips of strange points, non-points, exchanges where multiple points were coming up. It was just chaos, in my opinion.
For those who don't know, PSS means the Protective Score System, or basically the electronic vests and helmets. And yes, in the 3-4 first days, it was very awkward. The vests weren't scoring and the helmets were malfunctioning. And usually we know when you get the brands that the vests in the beginning, they're a little harder to score on, but the helmets are perfect. And there, none of it worked. It was a little bit, we've read comments on against it and in favor. Also, the marketing director from that brand came outside to defend the system and explain what happened. WT, of course, blamed it on them for experimenting with the software. But whatever it happened, it shouldn't have happened at this stage. That's the wrong stage to try something. It's the wrong stage to change equipment. It's the wrong stage to change rules. And it keeps happening. It keeps happening that they came and changed the rules of the game, or they do starting from the head of team meeting, the interpretation of the rules, and I explained as how the referees would apply them. And then on the first days of competition, you see sometimes on the same area, even though it's not the same referee team, it is the same weight division, the same situation by different players being judged different way. And it should not be like that. The same situation, doesn't matter who the players are, should be scored and judged the same way.
César, you hit on something, and I want to go back. I've been around this sport a long time, since the 80s, okay? And, I'm going to go back 2 Olympic Games to a point that you said about changing stuff. In 2000, people forget, up until that point, La Just, whatever you think about it, was the scoring system in 2009, 2011, and before
2011 until 13 when they canceled it.
In 2012.
11.
Yes, but for the event, they took it out, and we did manual scoring. So if we're going for electronic, they did manual scorings in the world qualifiers. They put NATO in to the Olympic Games, and it was basically the first time for many people, very short time for many people to use that. Okay, there's a big change from one system to the other. All right, fast forward to 2016. 2016, they had Generation 1, and at the Olympics, they went to Generation 2. Now, there was I always point to the country of Iran. At the time, the 58 athlete, Farzad, was the best 58 guy. He was a magician on the system. He knew, matter of fact, he would hit it so often, if it didn't score, he would look kind of cross-eyed like, that didn't score. He goes out there, and that's when they went to Generation 2. So you have people that have been working for 4 years, that have mastered their craft for 4 years, and on one day, they change it, and it changed the dynamics of that Olympic Games. And and here we go into this rumors that they were fiddling with a new system. How can we do this? How can we continue to make these mistakes? And I'm going to say they're mistakes, because if you want to change something, you change it well in advance, you give notice, and then everybody can prepare. But at the World Championships, at the Olympic Games, at the Olympic qualifiers, that's 3 Olympic cycles that I can just think of off the top of my head right now speaking with you.
You can get back, and you can remember that every time they change the rules, they change it on the General Assembly the day before the World Championships. So we already knew that on the day of the competition, you had to go study whatever changed. And then it started, as you mentioned, many in the 80s when they started doing that. In the early 2000s, they did a lot, especially when the electronic system came. It happens a lot with electronic helmets in the 2012. The video replay, they started introducing the different approaches of kicking to the head. The 2012 qualifiers, as you mentioned, we were in Europe training with Dedo all the time and competing with Dedo all the time. And then we went to the Olympic qualification tournament back into old vests and manual scoring. So the players that were being very successful with the Dedo system weren't able to qualify, and then the players that were using La Just or not at all went to London, and I was there together with you. We were in different countries at the time, but actually I'm in the country where you are now, and you are. You get people trying the Dedo just a few months before and going into the arena with a total new vest. At the time, the helmets were still manual, but the system was very interesting to see. And Farzan was one of those that fell through the.
I want to ask you a question, because I know we're kind of focusing where we're going to continue to focus on the World Championships in Guadalajara, but like this year, the year 2022, from the beginning of the year, think about. And I want to know your opinion. Think about what it started at the beginning of the year with this clinch and this push and stuff, and then change in Paris and change. Like, think about this year. This year's been like no other year. This has been an absolute mess. So I would
say 2016 we had a lot of changes, but this year we had 8 at least interpretation of the rules or even smaller version of the rules. On a big scale of changing, and I've mentioned this in other episodes, because we changed from 40 years of tradition that in the end of the third round, the one with most points would win, to actually have best of 3. And that's a huge change. That was the biggest of the changes. And then when they come into clinching and pushing and grabbing and not grabbing and pushing out, and they changed it so much that we're back into what it was 10 years ago, that you're going to the clinch to rest.
Yeah. Well, so here's my question. Why are we changing, and who is really determining these changes? I know who's determining or how it kind of goes, but like, was it so bad last year that we needed to change this year? Like, think about that. The round by round system, again, pros and cons, it's a different style, but it didn't change the rules per se of what you could do in the match. But I just remember the beginning of the year where it became a shove show. And if you read the rules, I like this stuff because the rules say right now, if your hands crossed, it's a kamjan. But now they're interpreting it different and they're letting us do it. So in a strange way, we're not following our own rules. They say if you interfere with the kicking leg, which is basically the cancel for everybody that knows, it's a kamjan. And early in the year, you ask the referees directly in the technical meeting, if somebody does this and I do this, it's kamjan, 100% kamjan. You go to the event a day later, people are canceling. So we're doing it. So it's crazy to me that we changed the rules. They try to implement that, but then they haven't implemented it. And now they're saying we're fighting a certain style right now that is not according to the rules. It's not detailed to the rules.
It's not. The thing is like kicking the back of the head in the clinch is being enforced only half of the times. Pushing without kicking is not being enforced at all. And when they changed the latest version of the rules, I mentioned to some people that were actually translating into Spanish and other languages, guys, they removed the running away. They removed the point of running away. Nobody even noticed. And then some referees applied that if run away 3 times, you get a kanjan. Others, you only get a kanjan whatever the referee wants. And we've seen situations, especially at these Worlds, of people doing laps like ceremony laps around the swimming pool and not one single penalty. And it's ridiculous that we go to a point that if you kick and if you're hunting the other one and your leg is in the air, but if it's not fully stretched, you get a capture. And if you're running away for half an hour, you don't get anything. It's just we're fighting with the rules that are unwritten, and it depends on the interpretation of the guy that's in the middle, being the referee.
That's it. 100 rules are unwritten, and it's up to the interpretation. So, listen, I was very disappointed, and again, it's not a personal attack. I was very disappointed in the level of the refereeing at the World Championships. There was glaring mistakes that affected matches, that took away medals. And I thought about it. I'm like, why is it, in my opinion, so bad? And I said, you know what, maybe because I have been to 3 Grand Prix up until this point, and it wasn't so bad. I mean, I feel like we understood what the referees were calling, once we got past this clinch thing, and there was some consistency. But I thought also that was a smaller referee group over a shorter period of time. So there wasn't so much up and down.
It's also the universality. You have to, at the World Championships, you have to have representation from every continent, and some continents don't have the possibility to practice so much as others.
This was my conclusion. This was my my excuse for the very varied ring to ring, match to match, event, or just this was my defense of the poor refereeing. Because listen, there was some times where you can say there was interpretations, people running around the ring, people, pushing or grabbing. Okay. But then there was glaring ones where an athlete scores a point, does 2-3 steps out of bounds, gets a deduction for going out of bounds like they rightfully should. And then the referee waves the point up. It's like, that's just,
wrong.
It's wrong. I understand if there's like an exchange, but if there's a kick, like literally you're 2 meters in and then the person runs back and steps out. That's not, if a referee is making those kind of mistakes, something is off. Something is off. And I saw that.
How can the video replays with the quality cameras that they have fail so much?
Well, the problem too is because of the system, people are using their cards. They were getting denied, and they were at the mercy of the referees and the lack of video, of lack of connection of the point. So this was a tough one to swallow. I mean, and I love the World Championships. Like I said, we talked great things earlier, but this was definitely a difficult one for everybody to swallow.
Yeah, the electronic system for sure. Not that the other one is much better, because there's also mistakes. I have my opinion on both systems, and I know that the system used is not a bad system. The other one is not better or worse. They have different failures. They're not perfect. And again, how many times in this podcast we talk that technology is not up to what the sport should be.
Yeah, no,
We're adapting the rules because the technology is failing. And I'm happy that they gave us the card back. Can you imagine if we didn't have the card to ask for the head kicks?
Yeah. I mean, that was a good change, quite honestly. That was one that I think was obviously well received. And, I agree with you on the systems. I mean, I always tell people, be careful what you ask for, because you might get it. And, there's people crying to use one system or the other. This one works better. I'm like, it almost goes in cycles, right? I mean, why did LaJust get out? Because data works better. Now, why does this one? Because this one works better. Or does it? I mean, you're right. They both, nothing is perfect. They both have their problems and their troubled areas. So I just, obviously, well, we know as coaches and athletes, we want consistency, and we want, we want to know that the PSS system that we're using, whether it's this one or this one, works consistently, and we can count on it working. We can count on it scoring. And
well, the thing is, you have two systems that, from the technical characteristics, they're totally different. One works with magnets and resistance and magnetic coils. Another one works with NFC and contact foil. It's two different ways of technology being applied. So it's like comparing maybe an Android with an iPhone operating systems. They're different. They're not the same, and the way you use them, it's not the same. So you will not fight the same with two different systems. So it's very inconsistent. It's good that a few years ago, WT decided that at least the scoreboard is the same. Remember when they had different scoreboards? It was very complicated to even analyze the match as a coach, because we have to pay very close attention of the scoreboards to see which referee pressed the button, or is the turning kick there, or is the headshot there. At least that is standardized. But then we go to a point that the technology is so different one from the other that some kicks are even impossible to use with some system. People are using total different fighting styles. Even the blocking is different if you know how to use the systems.
So, if you think about it, like, when it first came out, and there was these two different systems, I said, it's like tennis, right? You play on hard court, clay court, or grass. And there's some specialists that are really good on clay. They're not fast enough or strong enough to be hard court players. So then I thought about golf. I thought about even like some fields in football. Some are bigger, some are. But then I thought about like sports that are like rings and stuff like that. Like, there's no difference. Like, can you imagine basketball? Oh, we have a little higher rim, or a little wider rim, or a little, or American football. Or, I mean, you have to have some standards, and to have these different systems. And you're right. It's glaring. Some athletes are much better on one system than the other, because you're right. Whether it's the speed of the kick, the power of the kick, the difference of the blocking. I mean, and if you're not well adept to it, it's kind of tough. It's kind of unfair. I mean, we got to have some consistency. And I know you want to have open commerce, but maybe every company should have the same electronics in their version of what it looks like on the chest protector. Adidas.
Exactly. Like, you can have whatever soccer ball you want, whatever manufacturer it wants, but it has to follow the specifications. It has to have the same size, the same weight. And with the vests, they're totally different. And I understand one system has some technology it's different than the others, and they're fighting on different directions. But it's up to WT to standardize and say, listen, these are the technical specifications. Everyone can manufacture them, but with these specifications. If it's magnetic or NFC, it's WT that has to decide. They can have external consultants. They can have Swiss timing. They can have whoever they want to work with the system, like at the Olympics. But they have to follow the rules. Can you imagine that if for cycling or track and field, that the only one, every tournament would be a different stopwatch, that work differently. Even if it's different stopwatches, they still have to make the same time. And it's in PSS is different, and we cannot work if it's like this. And the quality, it's not yet paired to what we want it to be.
And the funny thing is, I was talking to one of my colleagues, one of my coaches, one of my former athletes and coach, and he made a good point to me this afternoon. He said, "You know what, coach?" He's like, "We are a culture of just figuring it out." Think about it. Everything always comes back to the athletes and the coaches. They never, the manufacturers or the whatever, they never take responsibility for it. If things don't work, kick it a different way. If things don't work, kick it higher. If the tournament doesn't have transportations, get an Uber. I just got back from another event and it rained all day. It was a swamp. And if you were a soccer player or a baseball player and something like this happened, they would just sit around kind of go, officials, figure it out so that we don't get hurt. Figure it out so that we can go play. But in our sport, we're like, people are picking up mats and going to a dry place. And I mean, if the food isn't there, we find food. If the mats aren't there, we find mats. If the chest protectors don't work, we have to adjust. Like it's really bad that, again, I always, because I'm part of a federation now, federations and coaches and athletes, they are the ones always adjusting to everybody else. That's not the way it's supposed to work. The people above should be setting the table so that we can play they on an even playing field, on a transparent playing field, on just a consistent playing field. But it's never like that. I talked to one of my friends, him well, Rosendo. And I told Rosendo, I said, we're having the same conversations, the same complaints, the same scenarios for the last 15 years, 20 years, maybe more. I'm like, and he's like, he told me what he felt about it. And, this big coaching brouhaha. I mean, you were there, you saw me. I mean, I stood in the back and I let the new guys kind of fight and talk and this and that. I just kind of, in my brain, while I knew it was good, in my brain, I was like, this is sad. Because I was there 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And it's sad that they and we do it again and again and again. And especially at the World Champions, a Grand Prix final, Olympic qualifications. I mean, it's not fair. It's not fair to these kids that put in their whole lives. It's not fair to these countries. I mean, you come from a small country that you have to pull your resources and just do everything. It's not.
I was talking every day with Rosendo. We were in the same hotel, and many other of the coaches were there. US was there, Serbia was there, Canada was there, France was there. Spain was there, so we can imagine the group, and you know them because we're all friends. We've been traveling together on and on for 2 decades, and we come back to the same conversation. We come back to the fact that we don't know what next year is going to be in terms of adaptation of the rules, what events, or the fact that we don't go through a season with a system or with a competition format. We have in the World Championships in Baku in 6 months. In 6 months, we're going to be using a system that we know that is barely going to be used in some regions of the world in some tournaments. Mm-hmm. So it's the same as like if you're in Pan Am region, you're using a system that's not going to be used in the Grand Prix qualification tournaments or whatever. And we still don't know which system is going to be used in the Olympics, and the Olympics is in 2024. So how can you prepare? How can you develop your players and adapt, knowing that the systems are different? And what kind of investment are you going to do? Right now, I have, I don't have, but I use it for many years. Adidas, I don't have, but I use it for many years. But I have KPNP, I have Data Generation 1, I have Data Generation 2, and now I even have the 2020 Armor because they're amazing to work with. And I don't know which one I should use in training as a long term, because my first event in February is maybe going to be with one system and the world's going to be with another system. And my players will have to adapt. I will have to adapt. I have to have training sessions that's specific for different systems. And I'm a club. Even though I'm a high performance center, I'm still a private high performance center. I'm a club. So all this investment, it's unbearable.
Yeah. And, I mean, I know at the World Championships, we spoke a lot about the competition schedule. We talked a lot about professionalizing the referees. It's I look at these athletes. I mean, look at the turnover from the World Championships to this last Grand Prix. The athletes are competing too much. These guys are so tired. They're so banged up. It's just, I know we've opened up the world to more events, which is a good thing, but have we gone too far? And now we're not necessarily getting our best product on the biggest stage. And I'll say we're not. We're not getting the best ones in their best fit moments. I mean, do we need to go back? We talk about old school, new school, where people are fighting one at a big event. No, absolutely not. We need to have more. But I think we've gone the other side. We've flipped so much that these athletes are, it was the Grand Prix in Manchester. It was the World Championships a couple weeks later. Some people went to the military World Championships and then the Grand Prix final. I mean, you have at least three major tournaments in 8 weeks.
In less than 4 weeks. And then you have if you looked at the Grand Prix final, and we could actually do another episode about it, most of the categories were not full. Some players just didn't show. The 57 was a shame to see that the two little players competing. And almost every division, you didn't have the 16 players. You had 15, 14, 13, 12. And then it's an event that is the highlight of the year. It was the latest, last event of the year. Quality players grabbing for points. And itself shows you that the systems, the competition format and the refereeing at the Worlds and the Grand Prix were so different that the medalists from the Worlds were not the medalists from the Grand Prix final. Even though in terms of periodization, being in peak performance in the Worlds would allow you to stay in peak performance for the Grand Prix final.
Yeah. And, even, again, we getting off subject with the Grand Prix final, even the Grand Prix final, when you look at it, there was a more consistency in the referees. Like there wasn't any glaring. I mean, I'm sure somebody can complain here or there, but there was no, in my opinion, no glaring like that was wrong, that was bad. I was like,
no,
they didn't notice them again, and that was a good thing, right? If you don't notice referees, that's a good thing. That means everything's kind of playing out the way it should. But again, we spoke about the good and we spoke about the bad. I think, for me, I think if you're right. If we have a consistent system so athletes can just professionalize themselves and perfect it, I think that would be good. I suggested a professional referee system as well. I know it costs money, but that's not our problem. That should be the WT's problem. You look at every other sport. They don't have volunteer referees at the highest level. You're a professional referee. And I'm talking about big sports. If we want to really be a big sport, we need to get the best 40 referee. I don't know what the number is. The best 40 referees in the world. Pay these men and women a salary. Professionalize them. That way, when they do well, they keep their job. But if they mess up time and time again, then it's time to be replaced. I just think that they would even take it more seriously. And I'm not saying they're not taking it seriously, but if you're just like anything, if your money changes everything. When you're a professional, you're getting paid to do something. There's a value in that, and you care. You care.
This podcast is supported by Hawken Dynamics. Hawken Dynamics believes that technology is most useful when it stays out of your way. That's why Hawken developed the world's first wireless force plate system with extreme usability. It is the quickest, easiest to use, and most robust solution on the market. It is trusted by all sports organizations large and small, as well as tactical, military, and rehabilitation environments around the globe. It's force testing in the palm of your hand. Here at Taekwondo Center, we use Hawken Dynamics to test and monitor our team. The cloud-based platform allows us to access data and publish a variety of reports on the go. My favorites are trend reports and, of course, weight reports, where I can monitor different metrics to view progress and identify performance indicators, or to compare weights to a baseline data range. I use it on a daily basis to identify readiness. A simple jumping test takes me less than a minute to assess the entire team. Having my own Hawken Dynamics force plates allows me to test reactive strengths, maximum strengths, rate of force development, asymmetry, and so much more. The real-time feedback on the app is useful not only for testing, but as a training tool, making it more accurate and at the same time more engaging for the athletes. If you are interested in learning more about Hawken Dynamics or getting your own, the team can be reached at info@hawkendynamics.com or on Instagram or Twitter @HawkenDynamics.
This podcast is sponsored by First Beat Sports. First Beat Sports combines the most comprehensive analytics in team sports with a customizable interface to support real-time monitoring, recovery monitoring, performance management, and much more. The result? Data-driven decisions that support your athletes and team training, recovery, and performance goals. First Beat Sports is trusted by professionals. Over 23,000 athletes representing over 1,000 teams around the world rely on the solution to train and plan with confidence on a team and individual level using HRV-based insights. For more information, please visit our website, firstbeat.com/sports.
When talking about Taekwondo training, we need to talk about Athlete Analyzer. Athlete Analyzer is the first Taekwondo-specific athlete monitoring system. It is used by both national teams, regional squads, and small clubs to maximize performance, prevent injuries, and communicate with both athletes and trainer teams. Athlete Analyzer is a cloud-based system with a friendly smartphone app. You can plan and monitor every aspect of your training, even when you are not in the gym with your team. The easy-to-use video analysis tool is not like anything you've seen. It helps you understand your athletes and even their opponents, making this app the only tool you need to manage your team. Before I used Athlete Analyzer, I spent an absurd amount of time in front of the computer, creating spreadsheets and using half a dozen software solutions. I have athletes in my center, but also abroad, and with Athlete Analyzer, it's much easier to communicate, plan, and monitor their development. Now that I have extra time, I can focus on what matters, training my athletes, and it still leaves me some room to do other stuff, like this Taekwondo podcast. Athlete Analyzer offers you a 2 weeks free trial. Visit them at athleteanalyzer.com to sign up, or click on the link in the episode's description. To get the most of your free trial, I recommend you first book a free personal demonstration with Nicholas. It will give you a great insight of what Athlete Analyzer has to offer you and your team. It is well worth the time.
You're listening to the Taekwondo Podcast. Now back to your hosts, Coach César Valentim and Peter Nessler.
So again, we're talking about professionalism at a high level. We are in a sport that we don't have that. We don't have the professional referees the same way we don't have the professional players and the professional coaches all the time. We don't have a league system. We don't have a tier system. The fact that you have G1 or G2 tournaments, it's a ranking weight of the event, but it's not a division. It's not a first and second and third league. You basically have beginners that never won anything or don't have the experience. And I'm not only talking about players, I'm talking about coaches and referees going to events, competing at the same time or against Olympic athletes, professional coaches, and top referees. And we don't have that.
Where does that ever happen? Where in any other sport does that happen? Where is that ever allowed? Not in soccer, not in boxing, not in football. It doesn't happen.
City marathons. It's the only place where you have the lady that trains two times a week competing with the top athletes.
But they have the top athletes start at one time, and these people start at another time. You know what I'm saying? You don't have Juan Moreno standing next to like the top Ethiopian runner. You know what I'm saying? There is some kind of like category. So, I mean, I'm being facetious and I'm just being a little bit crazy and I'm picking it, right now, but it's just, to your point, there should be no reason why, Panipak should be fighting against some club level athlete at a G1 tournament if she decided to go there, or Jay Jones or any of these athletes, Czech CC, it shouldn't happen. There should be levels and leagues, and again, this is what, going to the World Championships, even the World Championships. I mean, there should be a standard. I know we kind of say let everybody come, but what's wrong with saying the top 64 in the world qualify?
Or at least a qualification, or like they have in some sports where you have at least the minimums.
Yes.
So you should not be able to go to the Worlds if you don't have at least a G tournament medal. That's it.
Yeah, something like this, some kind of standardization, but listen, this World Championship was tough to bite off, and I know this was the first one since 2019. We had the COVID year, we have referees getting back, we have athletes getting back, but I'm just not going to make an excuse for it. I'm not going to sit here and in my brain I move on so fast, and I almost feel like that was so long ago. But it's if we don't understand history, we're going to keep repeating it, and so I don't think we should let this one go. I think we need to keep talking to the powers to be. There was glaring problems at this event, and they need to be fixed. They can't be like, oh, okay. No problem. That's not good enough. I mean, we understood that. Here's the solution. I think they owe that to us. They owe that to the athletes, and I keep saying us, I mean the Taekwondo family, the Taekwondo people together, but really it's the athletes, right? Because they're the ones that,
Have you noticed that since the Worlds, when we have a conversation with someone that was there or that even wasn't there, but is some involved at a high level with the coaching, that we always talk about the problems. We don't talk about how amazing Mary Kodabagachi or how Carlos Sansores won the heavyweight. We don't talk about them. We're talking about what problematic week was until the system and the refereeing starting getting themselves aligned with the sport.
You're right. I mean, again, that's a problem. When we're highlighting so many bad things, that's a problem. When you watch again the World Cup, when the World Cup is over, we'll talk about the amazing play. Yes, there was a couple of calls here and there that people didn't like, but you're going to talk about the amazing play. The Super Bowl in America, there's going to be a missed call by a referee, but at the end of the day, you're going to talk about the amazing pass, the amazing catch, the amazing block, something like that. And you're right. Look at this conversation. There was some, Carlos Sansores winning a world championship, Daniela hitting that shot at the end. A lot of Mexicans.
But also Daniel Quesada, some Vito or Salim, and some amazing shows and a lot of the matches that were decided in the last second because the players were basically so impetuous and they didn't give up until the last second, make a turning kick and turn the scoreboard. So there were amazing situations at the game, but we don't talk about them. At least not with the other coaches.
That's the round by round system is good or bad? What's your opinion?
I like it. I love it.
Yeah. Now, it has changed the sport because, I mean, you look at matches and let's just give you a number. Someone's winning 11-2 and they're going to the second round. They sit here like this. You rush more. You get hit more. It's tough because that person's like, man, I have to make up 9 points. But when it goes back to 0-0 and you see that person steal the round, it's pretty, and now there's a third round. I mean, I think it's really exciting.
I've been defending the system from the beginning. I didn't propose it. I never suggested it in the podcast. But when the rules came, I was straightforward saying that it's going to be a much better and dynamic sport. The first round will be much more active instead of just waiting, studying the opponent and letting it go for the second round when I can go finally for the point cap. No, the first round has to be fought. And then you have the fact that if you lose the first round, you have to drag yourself out of the grave and go into win 2 rounds after each other. So it brought a dynamic that was never the question. The question, as you mentioned at the beginning of today's episode, is that the rules changed 8 times since January. Since we first saw the first draft in January, and then what was published in February, and what was applied at the World Championship, we had 8 minor or bigger versions. And we discussed so many times in this podcast, we discussed, what about the situation? What happens if I'm winning already, if I decide not to fight in the third round? What about the superiority here and there? And yes, now they came with turning kicks and the highest score technique, the touches. And then we go to, sometimes, if the system doesn't work, to the Wusegiro referee decision that many, many times was wrong. But again, the problem is not that. The problem was the system didn't work and let them come to that point. And, and again, we've the entire episode, we didn't talk about one single athlete. We only talk about the system.
Even that, I agree with you. I brought it up because I think that contributed to the excitement of this World Championship. I think if you had the other system, it would have been worse. It would have been worse.
Much worse.
I think that this is a system. I like it. There's some weird things that, where somebody wins 12-0 the first round, they lose the second round 1-0 because somebody fell, and 1-0 the third round because they went out of bounds. Kind of hard to explain that, but by and large, I agree with you. But what I will say is this whole system of, this is why I go to like who's deciding what the sport should look like. When they say, okay, now we have this criteria to break the ties. 4 points, there are 5 points for this and 4 points, and it goes down, and we're supposed to keep track of all this stuff. It's like saying in football, you scored a goal and I scored a penalty kick. The goal weighs more than the penalty kick. No, it's 1-1. A basketball, you shot 10 3-pointers. Well, I made 20. It's tied. Nobody, who scored the most points? If it's tied and I got touchdowns and you scored 2 body points, the score's tied. It's a different way to compete. I don't like this whole breaking up and trying to calculate who scored or who.
At least now the scoreboard shows who has the advantage.
It helps. It definitely helps. I mean, but I don't know. It's a little bit.
Not for
weird,
us only, it's for the audience. I think the audience most of the times don't understand who won the round.
Yeah. Well, this was not a for as good as the event was, as far as the combination of the event, it was good. But as far as the field of play and the production of it, it was below par. And hopefully it will be resurrected and much better. And again, from the PSS and the refereeing and all that kind of stuff for Baku, because it's going to be, it's the year before the Olympics next year. I mean, it's good. As important as this year was, we know I forgot the number, there's so many points available out there between the 40G points, the 20 President's Cup, the Continental, the Continental
Championship.
Yep.
The
World
games.
Yep. 3 Grand Prix, a Grand Prix final, the Wuxi.
Combat games.
Don't get me started on the Wuxi.
There's a lot of points for grabs. There's until the Olympics ranking is closed before Paris. There's a lot of fight to do. Honestly, the PSS that was used at the Worlds, I think they are good. I think they will be able to fix it. That we will in the next season with a good competition. Not gonna defend that the other one is better, or that we should use the other one and put this one on hold. Not gonna say that because I don't agree with that. I agree that both systems have their positive sides. They have their negative sides. They both need to be improved, and I think both of them are working. If you look at the other system that was not used at the Worlds, the version from 2016 and the version from now is way different, even though it is the same equipment and it looks the same. The software is inside, or at least the firmware is different, but it's still the same equipment. The fact that you can use the 7 or 8 year old equipment with the new rules and the combination with the newest out of the factory equipment, it's a positive side. It's not generation 1, generation 2, but at least not out as a commercial sale point. But it is on the development of the technology. The helmets are better, the vests are better, and the same with both systems. They're getting better, and I think that the companies behind it do have the motivation to do it. But sometimes they make mistakes, and at this stage, they shouldn't have been doing mistakes like that. But Juan, I think this episode we will not make all the way to talk about the players. We'll do how they call it, hanging on the end of this episode, and we'll talk about the results and the players and the matches we saw on the show, and the most important thing of the sport, the athletes, on next week's episode.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, I know we have the end of the year coming up, but I always love to speak with you, and I appreciate what you do for the sport of Taekwondo, because information is imperative for everybody. And I think getting people to talk about current events and the good and the bad, again, not making it personal, just, objectively trying to give our positions so that we can make the sport better. So I appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Juan. It was a pleasure being with you and with everyone who's listening out there. This is part 1. Apparently, we have a episode next week, still about the Worlds with Juan Moreno. This was a Taekwondo podcast. If you haven't already, listen to our other episodes that are available wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are releasing new episodes every Tuesday. Stay tuned, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a positive review, and share it with your friends. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Taekwondo Podcast, keeping the fans, coaches, and high-performance athletes up to date with the latest news and trends on Olympic Taekwondo. Your host, Coach César Valentim, has almost 20 years of experience with high-performance Taekwondo and has worked all around the world as a Taekwondo trainer. Peter Nessler has been teaching Taekwondo for more than 20 years, and he's currently one of the top referees in Europe. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram at Taekwondo Podcast, on Facebook at Taekwondo Cast, and the website taekwondopodcast.com. See you next time.